All right, this is Andy McNeill with another edition of Free Arkansas, and I'm here today with Kristain Thompson, who's running for the House seat in District 52. Kristain, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you doing, Andy?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm looking forward to talking about the district and what's important to you. And I think I know quite a bit about you. Well, I know you work at Tech.
Yeah.
I know that you, I know that you quarterbacked Dardanelle almost to the state almost to state championship, and that's so rare sometimes to get that far. At the moment you feel like, oh, this is going to happen every year. And
yes.
So yes, and then you realize, like, sometimes things just don't happen very often. But tell me a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up on the outskirts of Little Rock on County Line and Lawson Road.
Okay.
And grew up on a farm out there. My papa, my family, they had a dairy farm and everything, then turned it into a cattle farm. And, that's where I learned a lot of my values and everything that I believe. And so, hard work, looking people in the eyes, telling them things that they need to hear, not what they want to hear. My papa was really instrumental in teaching me a bunch of those values and things that, have really come to serve me really well in life and in everything that I'm doing. I moved around a couple of times, but I ended up transferring to Dardanelle when I was after my 10th grade year. And so, going there, I tell everybody that Little Rock is where I was born, but Dardanelle is my hometown.
Right.
Because I feel like that was the place where I really found myself and was just real. I feel like everything that I was taught on that farm, just translated so well to when I moved to Dardanelle and just met all the great people, and everybody there just kind of took me in. And, it was just me and my mom that moved. And, it was pretty much like everybody just, invited us in as just their own family, and people treated me like I'd been there for forever. And so, I ended up playing football there, just like you said. We almost won a state championship. And a bunch of those guys, we still talk today. We still have our fantasy league and stuff like that. And we were a really close-knit group of guys. And we've continued to stay close. And so now it's like we're all kind of going through that next stage of life of everybody's having kids and everybody's getting into their careers and things like that. And everybody's doing good. That's one thing that I really like to hang my hat on is, all of us are doing good. Everybody's doing okay. Everybody's safe, doing the right things. And, after, having those lifelong friends are really important. But we ended up, after I graduated high school from Dardanelle, I wasn't ready to just leave the area just yet. So we ended up going to Arkansas Tech, and it was one of the best decisions I ever could have made. I wouldn't change anything about it. We ended up coming here. I met my wife here. We've been married for 8 years now. We have 2 beautiful kids, Taylor and Bradley, and they've been, just a joy. Just being who they are and, being a father and everything like that's been very, it changes a lot of things when you become a father. Sure it
does, yeah.
And you never know if you're doing it the right way either. That's the other thing. You never know if you're doing it right. And so, I have a great wife who's, she's in her career and does a lot of great things in the community, and everybody loves her. And, I tell everybody I outkick my coverage. Like, she's one of them.
I definitely feel the same way about my wife, So,
yeah. And when you're lucky like that, you hold on to them and you say, yes, ma'am, at some of the points, and you just keep on rolling.
Yes. Well, I'm curious, your grandfather having, an imprint on your life. Is there a particular time or like memory that you're like, and is he still alive?
Man, Andy, I wish he was alive.
Yeah.
Like, when I tell you that, like, I was thinking about that this morning, that there's so many questions that I have and so many things I'd want to ask. And I know that he would look at me right now when I started running this campaign and being like, dude, well, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, but also, those riding around in the truck, riding around on the farm and just watching how he lived his life and how he treated people. He wasn't going to be I did not get my outgoingness or anything from my grandpa.
Right.
Like that, he was a man of few words, but when he spoke, people listened.
Right.
And, he had so much respect, like at his funeral and stuff. And, everybody starts coming around and, people that you've never met before start telling you stories about your grandpa that you never knew. And, he was a man's man. And that's, if I can, that's what I hold my standard to. He was really proud of what he did. The way that he was a father to my mama and, taking us in. We lived with them a majority of my life growing up.
Yeah. So he had a really big imprint.
Yes. So it wasn't just, you go on the weekend to spend the night or anything like that. And that's one of the reasons why I moved back to Yale County was because the impact that my grandpa had on me, I want my kids' grandparents to have that impact on them. And he was taken away so suddenly that, he was up fixing fence the day he died. And then he went home and just sat in his chair and didn't wake up. And so, it's just one of those things that, I have so many questions. And also, I would love for him to just be with me through this process that I'm going to. And that was before that senior year of football. It was right before.
Oh, right before that, too. Okay.
Yeah. So
he got to miss all of that, so to speak, at least in person,
Yes, in person. But I'll tell you this, there's a couple times where we were in the playoffs where I think he helped me out.
It's funny how that works out. I don't know if this would be a thing for you, but like, so on my phone, I guess because I have an Apple phone and, things that I've been doing on the Apple platform for the last decade still just sort of are there on my phone. Mm-hmm. And so my parents have both passed away, a number of years ago, but I still have their cell numbers in my favorites, and of course, like it's kind of a little bit of a nostalgic thing, but like, it's sort of just this reminder because there are moments in my life where I want to just pick up the phone and call them. Yes. Right. And sometimes it's the simplest moments. Like, hey, you're like, you're driving home and you got 20 minutes to kill. Right. And you're like something like that. And so, I miss that. And, but it for sure leaves a mark, And so, and I think that's sort of a special thing, And so is there somebody else that had a great influence you? Was there a teacher or something else that you'd say like, or is like, your grandfather's kind of the one you'd say like that's the one that had the biggest impact on me?
He's definitely the one that, because when I think about like, there was teachers and like I think about one, her name was Jenny Coy. Like I will never forget that lady. East class that they have in the high schools and stuff. So I was really big in East. And the thing that I remember, they had this conference every year and I was in the 6th grade the first time I ever got in the East class. And I wasn't the best East student at that point in 6th grade. I was like, you know what? Like, man, there's computers, there's games on computers and stuff. And that was like her one thing that like, she's like, do not play games.
Do not play games.
And I remembered that I applied to go to the conference or whatever. And she was just like, I remember her, being one of the first people that were like, look, you can talk, you can do all this stuff, but like, you have to center it. Like you have to, like funnel everything down, and you're good at this thing, but you need to, step it up in other places. And I'm somebody who like, now, maybe back then I didn't like accountability as much, but I'm somebody who loves accountability. And she was probably one of those first people to say like, hey, like you got something here, but I got to hold you accountable to all these other things. I can't just let you go just because.
Yeah.
And so she ended up she was the first person that ever put me on a public speaking thing ever. And I ended up going to that conference probably 6 different times after that. And, we always got that superior rating and things that you get in East and stuff like that. And that's kind of where it all kind of started for me with, getting in the student councils and doing all these different things. And East is probably what did that. And it kind of exposed me to a bunch of different types of people from not just in Arkansas, but some people would come from Hawaii.
Right.
Some people would come from these different states and stuff. And it kind of starts giving you like the thought of like, this world is bigger than what you think it is, but a bunch of the people still have the same values and things that you have.
Right. One of the things I think that for me, for sure, is, as my world got bigger, I realized there's all these different perspectives, and perhaps not everything that I think is the way it has to be, right? Sometimes it's just simple things like, how do you take your coffee, right? Or something like that, right? It's like habits and traditions, as opposed to like moral principles. It's just things that are different, right?
Yes.
And then you realize like, well, it's okay to like, like it's okay to eat French fries with mayonnaise, and so it doesn't have to be ketchup, and so, you married above your pay grade, you're a good athlete. So it sounds like you've accomplished a lot. Is there, what else would you say is, one of the accomplishments that you're really proud of?
Man. And to be honest with you, I think about that kind of stuff and like that stuff doesn't really get me excited,
Yeah.
One of the things that I really do like to hang my hat on is my relationship that I have with Christ. Like that is because I've came so far. And, I got a call yesterday about my son.
Yeah.
And his teacher had said that he had prayed for everybody in the class out loud. And, as a father, like you always wonder, like, if you're doing it right and things like that. And one thing that we're really big on is like, hey, we pray before everything, and I get that call yesterday and it brings tears to my eyes because I'm like, hey, he's picking something up, like he's doing like some of those things. He is really picking some of the stuff up and, we're going in the right direction. So like when you don't think you're doing it right all the time, you kind of get some stuff like that. And just, I think the things that I don't have like a list of things that I want to accomplish.
Right.
Like I've been blessed to do some things and like, you talk about football and stuff. I don't want to be remembered as a football player.
Right.
I want that to be an afterthought. I want people to forget that I played football.
Yeah.
And am I thankful and all? I would not be anywhere that I am right now without football. I will say that. But at the same time, there's so much more to this life than the short period of it that I play a sport or, I get this award or I get this and that. And so I just believe like, I don't know what all I'm going to accomplish and stuff, but I feel like that's something that somebody else would have to like answer almost.
Well, and one of the things too, when people talk like, I'm going to kind of go a little sideways here, but, oftentimes when we attach praise to something like, I think that, where there's some hollowness sometimes is that, we attribute somebody's meaning to something that in the grand scheme of things is relatively small. And so I would say if we use this high school athletics as just a simple example, there's all this spotlight on football. But if you just kind of backed up and you were like, a Martian coming into here, like you'd say, well, like, why is football any different than soccer or track and or like playing the tuba? And, you could be like, if you were like the best tuba player, someone may not even know it. Right. But like you do a little bit of good things on football and everybody's like, oh my God, you're a hero. So yes. and in some ways it's, if you're the recipient of this praise, it could be a little hollow. Like, okay, what did I really do to deserve all this? But anyway, okay, let's switch gears just a little bit on this. I'm curious, I want to ask, okay, if you go down, I really want to talk about how you deal with people. And I don't want to frame it in like the most crucial moral issues of the day. Because the truth is that, if there was 1,000 bills down there last year and we were to talk about them, now is to list them out, most of them are, they're nuanced language in regulations. They're nuanced language in taxation. And they really don't have anything to do with Republicans or Democrats. I mean, you might say that some of them do, like the small little fraction where everybody's, but a lot of them are, how we manage the budget of the state of Arkansas, which I'll even, tee back up for you, but like it's over $6 billion is what our budget is. Most of that budget is education, That's probably almost half. And then the next big chunk is healthcare in the form of Medicaid. And then it's prisons, state employees, and then the rest is rounding. I have this view that there's no way you could know 1,000 bills, right? Yes. There's no way, like, you don't have time to read them all. There's probably no way. Probably no way to know, like, what everybody in your district thinks, right?
Yes.
So I want to frame it in two ways. One is, how will you make decisions on how you think you're going to vote? How would you go about that? And where I want to sort of go with it is that, sometimes you're going to be, in a collaboration mode to solve problems, maybe. And sometimes you're going to be like, okay, I'm just not going to do that. And, so how does that work for you? Like, and can you just give me some examples in your day-to-day life? Maybe even with your wife, how do you guys decide? Like, we want to paint the front door. She wants pink. You don't think pink's great. What do you do?
There's some things that I say, like, don't overthink it. Like, there's some of those things that, if you're trying to find a problem with something, you're probably going to end up finding one. But the way that I like to make decisions and be informed on everything is, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I always tell everybody, if I am, we may have a big issue. But one thing that I always do is I have these relationships with people in these certain areas that I want to talk to, that I can trust. Building relationships is something that is very important to me, and something that if I had to bet my life on, you can put a random person in here and I can build a relationship with them, because I genuinely care about why you feel and how you feel about certain things. And so I like to collaborate with people. I want to hear, even if you are totally different than me, I want to hear why you feel the way that you do, because I think that that's important and that's what we need to do. But so if there's a farm thing that we need to talk about, you go to Farm Bureau, you go to your farmers and people that are actually watching this, who these things are going to affect, and you ask them how they think about it. You'll never be able, the way that I've kind of found out, especially going around, I'm not going to be able to know all 1,000 of those bills. But here's the thing, I'm going to know the people, and some of the other legislators. Like, I'm going to call some of them and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or how did you come to this? Explain this bill to me a little bit more. But also, you find your groups of people, the ones who really care in your districts about the legislation and who it's going to affect and how it's going to affect them, and let them explain it to you, but not just you have to get a few different views on it. You can't just go, well, this is my one person that I go to for this. Well, yes, I appreciate that, but let's talk to these 2 to 3 other groups that also have a stake in this too, and hear what they all have to say. And then you make an informed decision that's going to be the best for everybody. At the end of the day, we're down there to do the best for the most, and that's one thing that I truly believe in.
Yeah. So do you think that, I guess saying that, would you agree with the statement that knowledge is a thing? I mean, you can't have knowledge around something. Yeah. I think that too. I think that, and I think we live in a world sometimes today where, if I give silly examples like, hey, I'm about to fly to an airplane with your family. You got me and another guy to choose from to fly the plane. One of us has 10,000 hours in the plane, has been flying all the time. The other one just learned how to do it on video games, and so which one do you choose? And I say that jokingly because I think that most people would say, of course, I'm taking the person that's done that. And if I gave this with like a surgery, but we could very quickly get to things like, and then I'd like to use an example. Let's talk about vaccines for a second. We very quickly do an area where people will say they know. It doesn't matter, and you specifically get this on the COVID shot, where even though, so I view it where what people do is they say that there's a different truth, and we debate on what truth is. But I actually want to ask a different question, because I think you kind of said, hey, look, I think there is truth. We'd have to figure out what that is. And you do that through relationships. But, on vaccines, there's not a bill. There hasn't been a bill in the state house, but there could be, and I'm curious how you wrestle with this concept. So I think that, that if you like Republicans in Florida proposed a bill to say you don't have to vaccinate your children if you want to. And it's interesting because what I would say this pits like let's just call it like individualism, right? I don't have to do something I don't want to do, all right, versus the greater good of society, right? Because I think we could say, hey, the polio vaccine worked. People don't walk around with polio today. I don't know anybody my age that had the mumps or the measles. You know, I don't, you know, and I would just use myself, for example. If there was a vaccine against hemorrhoids, I would take that tomorrow. You know, if there was a vaccine to grow hair, I would do that. You know, so I look at it and say, like, I'm a science guy, so I would say, like, do that. But how would you wrestle with, you know, greater good versus individualism? Because it's a tough issue.
You know, I'm by no means a doctor or anything like that. But I think that people need to, you know, get their information from a valid source. And I think the thing with the COVID vaccine and all that stuff, like, I'm not like a big like flu shot guy and go get one like, I'm not like that. Like, I feel like I never really got sick until I started having kids, honestly. But I always tell, I kind of say that, hey, you have your decisions and your rights and things like that do come into account. But the biggest thing is you need to be informed, and you don't need, and some people don't get your stuff off of Facebook all the time. Let's go to peer-reviewed sources and things, and let's look. Now, the COVID vaccine, I really feel like just kind of got to a bunch of people was that, like, it came out like this. You know what I mean? And, you know, that I can see where people are like, well, you know, like, if it came out that fast, like, why haven't we found a cure for cancer yet? You know, like, people people say, like, all of a sudden we can do some of this other stuff really fast, but these other things we can't do as fast. And so I do think that, like, I don't think anybody's ever questioned the older vaccines, like what you're talking about, like the measles, the polio, and things like that. But at the same time, you need to know what you're putting in your body. And that goes with food. That goes with, heck, your medication and all these other things too.
Are you someone who would say less government is better, or government should be more involved?
I'm a less government guy. I mean, and that's supposed to be, you know, the Republican values, small government principles, fiscal responsibility, all of those type of things. Like, I'm not like I believe in the principles. And what we need to do, like, I don't feel like, you know, the local level is where a bunch of these things, like, they need to have more control. I don't feel like that we're voted in to tell everybody what they're supposed to be doing. Like, we're supposed to be working for everybody.
Let's let's noodle on that one. So, okay. So let's just, if you were down there last session, or maybe not last session, it's been a couple sessions ago. So you don't have to vote on this, but this would have been I mean, like, if you're elected, it wasn't something you would have been voting on, but it's been voted in, but pretty controversial. Tell me what you're hearing out there, pro and con, about the LEARNS Act.
So I think that we were in a place with our education system that we did need to do something, that we needed to do something differently than what we were doing. Do I think that, you know, everything was done perfectly in it? No. Do people feel that way? That, you know, do some people feel like that they weren't necessarily listened to, like they felt like they needed to be some groups? Are there some people that are really happy with it? Yeah. Are there some people who aren't? Yes. But one thing that I can say that I feel like they've, you know, done is, like, they're realizing that we're needing to change. And the only thing that worries me is I don't want our public schools to, you know, start going down because of, you know, people leaving and things like that.
So one of the things I think, and I don't know if this is correlated, but I would say that the rise of screen use, you know, and even the way you receive information in the form of Instagram and TikTok has made people's attention span get a lot smaller, and reading has decreased. And and other things are on the rise, like depression, anxiety, and other issues that people are having. And so I don't know if later on scientists will say those two things that I just said But I saw a statistic the other day that, like people your age will spend 25% of their lives in front of a screen.
Yeah.
Just think about that. And so and things like the number of books people are reading, is it's just plummeting, and it used to be that you could teach a kid to say, like, you're going to read like Crime and Punishment, but they'll find today that like people don't understand, like, they won't really understand it. And so they have to teach other things because people aren't going to read these books. You just can't, just like, they're not going to read Dickens, they're just not going to do it,
And I feel like that's a vital part. I mean, like learning that way, I feel like is a vital part too. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, I think so too.
Like, it's just like reading a book. I was talking to somebody about it the other day. Now I listen to a lot of books because I have a long drive to work.
Yeah.
But also, like, I feel that like I retain that information even better than like me sitting here reading it. But like when it comes to just like in school, I'm real big on like, I need some paper. I want to sit there and I want to look at it. I want to read it. I want to feel the book in my hand when it comes to learning. And like, do I think that there are kids nowadays that do really well with learning the other way and things like that? Yes. But I feel like we need to figure out a way to integrate both of them.
Yeah.
Like, I think that there are some good things, but then also like, I really think that there's some pen and paper things that are really good too. So, and that's kind of how I feel about it. And my kids, we're not real big screen time folks. Like, we don't have an iPad for them in the house and stuff like that. Like, I live where I live for a reason. I want you to go outside. I want my son, he loves being outside and playing and things like that. And that's kind of what we push for that, like, hey, go outside, play around, explore, use your imagination. And that's the thing that worries me about kids is, me and my brother, we would go outside and walk around and we'd go on and explore and do all of these different things and use our imaginations to be running from whatever we're running from or attacking whatever we're attacking and going and, just kind of going on missions is what we used to call them. We're going to go on a mission.
Yeah. So let me ask you one piece about the LEARNS Act to see, like, where you sit. I think one of the controversial pieces, there's a number of pieces that like people like, but one of the things that's, is the, basically the voucher program, and, and there's different arguments around this pro and con. So how do you think about it?
I think that vouchers are good in some aspects. And I think that they can be, when you get down to the nitty gritty of it, it's a tax break, at the end of the day. And so do I think that like there are some homeschool people and things that like need that voucher? Yes. I think that there are certain instances that it is okay for vouchers to be used, but also at the same time, I feel like that if they're going to be used, there needs to be a lot of stipulations and things that go along with the voucher. It doesn't just need to be, well, I decide to do this and this is what I'm going to do. Well, you need to stick with whatever you're going to decide to do until the next go around. Like kind of how we've talked about people being homeschooled and then taking their kids back to school and that money just kind of being lost.
Right.
Like, I feel like there needs to be some type of stipulation when it comes to situations like that. And I understand that it all sounds really good in the beginning. And some people just may have not have been just forward thinking when it came to like, hey, what are some of the issues that we may have with some of these things? But in my district, we don't have a lot of private schools. There's one private school. The vouchers, school of choice, I feel like, which is also good because I totally agree with people choosing where their kids go to school. Like my kids go to Dardanelle. That's where I went. We live far away from there, but we drive through every day. I want my kids to go to Dardanelle. But also, there are some schools that kind of stuff really hurts too. So I feel like in some points, vouchers and, school of choice, it's helpful. But then at the end of the day, there's also a negative component that comes from it.
Yeah, I sort of like look at this and I say, I think tax breaks not a bad way to think about it. Because I think if you were to like just focus on Little Rock as an example, in Little Rock, there was already choices, right? Now, how you had to fund it was different, right? Because you still paid into the public school. And if you wanted to go to private, you had to like double pay, right? So in that sense, if you're already made that choice in Little Rock, it's just a tax break, and you could have this philosophical view that says, hey, like this dollar of my taxes is really meant for education of my kids per se. Why don't I get to use it the way that I want to use it? Right. And maybe you could even say philosophically, why should the government tell me, what to do? Right.
Yeah.
I think that in rural Arkansas, it really doesn't matter. And in the sense that we don't really, I mean, you already have the choice in rural Arkansas of where you live. I think part of the issue is the broader issue is how do we take the most at-risk kids and lift them up because it's in our interest to do so, So, okay, let's pivot from those 2 points to the next one. So, Medicaid and how we provide healthcare for people is a pretty big issue. What do you hear out in the district if you talk to people? Because if you look at the numbers, people on public assistance for healthcare in Yell County, and this is probably true for the other counties in the district, is probably somewhere right around 40 to 45%. If you add Medicaid, and Medicare, I look at it and go like, I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but like I haven't used any government assistance, not in my business, not me personally. And so sometimes it could be easy for me to be cynical that says, well, like I'm putting a lot of money in, I don't get any benefit. Why shouldn't other people adopt the habits that I'm doing? And people could say that's incredibly arrogant. It's totally insensitive, but I think it stems to these points where people say, if you're able-bodied and you should at least go work, like do something, right? And so, and I understand that sort of thought around there.
Yeah.
But like I don't know, like do you meet people who you think are just like taking advantage of the system? Do you like genuine like I'm scared, because I'm going to lose this and I don't know how I'm going to pay for it.
You know what? There's going to be people on both sides, whether we like it or not. Like there are people who really do need their Medicare, Medicaid, all of that. There are people that do truly need that. A lot of people in my district, because we are an older district, they do need that. And I was somebody who I was raised by a single mom.
Yeah.
Okay. I was on Our Kids A. When we didn't have to have that copay, my mom was pumped. And guess what? I went from not going to the doctor to, hey, I was going to the doctor regularly, going to the dentist regularly and things like that. And so do I think that in the cases of, the older generation who have worked and done what they're supposed to and get that advantage? Yes. Like if you're over the age and you're getting that, you deserve to get that. Okay. If you've done what you're supposed to do in life, you've retired, you've done all these things. Now, are there going to be people who take advantage of the system? Yes. Do we need to figure out ways to figure that out? Yes. It's a really complex issue just like that, because guess what? There are going to be people who fall through the cracks. There are going to be people who get stuff taken away that shouldn't get stuff taken away. And these are the things, though, if we're going to, make this an issue and make this something that we're really going to need a hold of, we have to be very careful with how we do it, because we don't want people who deserve and have earned these things and need these things at the end of the day to get them taken away because we're trying to weed out the bad people.
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, I'm also somebody that if you're working and able-bodied, then you got to go to work. We have to figure something out for you. Now, look, that's another thing that happens in our district. Do we need more jobs and things like that? Yes.
Yeah.
But, it's a complex issue, like you said, but it's going to take a lot. It's going to be an all hands on deck type of approach when it comes to it, if they're going to do it the right way. And if we're going to, it just, at the end of the day, we have to figure out what is our goal with it.
What I find really interesting, Christian, is, and this is a broader conversation that you won't really wrestle with down at the State House, because a lot of this is federal, but if you're over 65, you're eligible for Medicare. And when you pay your payroll taxes, you're putting money into Medicare. And, but what you put in may not be anything you take out, right? Because you may not get very sick, right? Like you may be like your grandfather. You may say, hey, he's working on a fence, and then he dies. And the expense that he consumed, let's assume he was on Medicare, is radically different than somebody who's got like Alzheimer's, dementia, long-term cancer care, right? Those are all very, very expensive, right? And you could, and you sit there and say, like, the reason I think they don't attack Medicare is because most of the wealth in the United States is in people over 65. Most of the people over 65 vote. They're a bit more organized. And there's nothing really about like go to work, you're 65 years old. So in that category, what they do is attack the drug companies and say, because most of these people are on some prescription drugs, right? Most kids aren't, but most older people are. So you attack the drug companies and say, they're the ones. When it gets down to Medicaid, we're talking about people that are essentially, at the lower rung of society in the sense of what they earn. They don't earn enough to be able to adequately pay for their healthcare coverage. And, they're probably a little bit healthier because they're younger, but essentially it comes down to like what we're going to do with kids, and, in a lot of ways. And so it's just an interesting battle, that goes on here. And so, and our states, what's interesting about our state, and I'm sort of pontificating here, is when they expanded Medicaid, our state decided to do those matching. And the federal matching keeps falling, so ours will keep rising. And so we'll have to make decisions because we won't have enough money. The reality of we want to help everybody. If we could, we'd save everybody, but we don't have the. Okay. Let me switch into a couple other things. So, last cycle, the legislator, not everybody, and remember, this is all run by Republicans, so plenty of Republicans voted against this, voted to put display the 10 Commandments in our schools. Now, we've talked before about less government not telling what to do. Why is putting the 10 Commandments in the school not exactly an example of the government telling us something, and specifically telling us something about religion? So, and I say it that way because, because I want to be a little forceful about it, but so what would you have done, and what is your view on that?
I would have voted for it.
Yeah.
Because, at the end of the day, I feel like those are the types of principles that our country was founded on. If you go back and you go and look at the original 13 constitutions and things like that, what are they referring to in those 13 constitutions? That is what we were founded on. If I feel like our government has actually been set up to be led by strong Christian people at the end of the day. If you take the God and everything out of it and you just list those as rules, that's some really good rules to go by at the end of the day. And I don't feel like we have a history of this. Like, you can go back and you can clearly see the history of some of these things and how our country was founded. If it was founded on something else, it would have been founded on something else.
Would you say, let's display the first 10 amendments to the Constitution? Because we all talk about them all the time, right? Second Amendment, First Amendment, but those aren't displayed everywhere. Would you display those?
I don't mind that at all. I think that everybody, I'll say this, you could walk up to a bunch of kids nowadays and ask them, hey, name me the first 10 amendments. They wouldn't be able to do it. And so I think that some of those things are really important for people to learn and know, why? Because I think that kids need information. And for us we talk about this American dream. I feel like we have a strong responsibility to keep that going. And by not letting people know these certain things or teaching them at a high level what these things are, and this is why our country is why it is, I think that can become dangerous if we don't let people see those things. I'm fine with putting the Bill of Rights and all of that stuff up in the schools, because at the end of the day, that's our country. That's what we're founded on. And we are the standard. But for us to continue to be the standard, we need everybody to understand why we are the standard and what the first 10 things we decided to put down on that paper was.
And this is my last question. What do you think about privacy?
I think that the government's not supposed to be in your home. I don't think they need to be watching you. I think they need to stay out your finances, all of those different types of things. Like, once again, it's one of those principles that we were founded on for a reason.
Right.
And, are there times like if you search something on the internet or something that, if you get pinged for something like that, that's one thing. But like when it comes to, mom and pop down the road, that's minding their own business and stuff and living their life how they're supposed to, you don't need to be in their business. And that's a bunch of people's, like where we live. That's why we love living where we live, because everybody minds their own business. We all go to work. We all have these things. Everybody's just trying to survive at the end of the day.
Yeah. What I find is like an interesting way to like a thought experiment here, Kristain, is this. Mm-hmm. So Lockheed, the company Lockheed, in conjunction with a number of other companies working with with various government agencies back in the 60s as they were doing spy planes. The cameras that went around on the satellites in 1960 could get within 5 feet of something. So like at a 5 feet scope of what they could take a picture of from space. That is, 60 years ago. Yeah. And it was classified until the 90s. So I sit there and think, God knows what they're able to do right now that we don't know about.
Yes.
And so I look at it and say, it's really the collection of all these things coupled with AI tools where you'll be able to say like it's one thing if you said, okay, Kristain did something wrong. Now we have a warrant. Now we can go collect his stuff versus I'm just going to collect everybody's stuff. I'm going to run it through AI tools and I'm going to be like, Minority Report, I'm going to presuppose, so anyway, I think it's a big issue. All right. Last thing. Okay, you're walking around, you knock on someone's door or you're in front of a group of people and, you're giving them your intro pitch. What do you say?
The biggest thing is that, I'm not running with an agenda. At the end of the day, I want to go down there and I want to be everybody's voice. I want people to know me. I want you to be used to seeing me. I want to use social media as a tool to be able to educate all of my voters and all my constituents in the district. That's something that's really important to me. I don't want people voting for me just because my wife or my father-in-law or my mama or anything like that. I want you to vote for me because you believe in what I want to do for y'all. And at the end of the day, I don't mind, not always going, with everybody else when it comes to a point that it's not going to be good for us in our district. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, the vote has my name and everything by it, but it's not my vote. I got 30,000 bosses over here that, I have to come back and look in the eyes and say, hey, I'm down there doing the right things for y'all. And at the end of the day, I want to be able to show them that. And I'm just not, I feel like I was called to do this. I don't feel like I didn't wake up one day and was like, hey, I'm going to go and, run for state representative. I've really well thought this out and, I'm excited for what can come from this just because I feel like we're at a really vital part. And I feel like my generation is the generation that has to start stepping up and coming into government and being able to bring a new perspective because it's really hard for a bunch of us to live. And a bunch of these older voters and things that I see, they all tell me the same thing. They're like, we're just happy to see somebody that's young, that wants to go down there and do the right thing. And I let everybody see my heart. Like what you see is what you get with me. Like there's not going to be anything that surprises you. That's what I tell everybody. Yeah. The same person I am here is going to be the same person that I am down there. And, when I get that across to people, it seems like they're really receptive to it. And, I know what leads me and I'm very comfortable in what leads me.
Excellent. Well, Kristain Thompson, candidate, District 52. Thank you very much, and best of luck to your campaign. I'm sure I'll see you around town, and look forward to talking to you again.
Yes, sir.